So today we're going to look at some very, very basic things about Excel that are very important to you guys to be able to work in this class. So remember that all functions in Excel start with the equal sign. Okay, so if I want to add something up, and let's say I have a variable A here that is 34 and a variable B here that is going to be 56. If I want to add this up, I'm always going to have to put the equal sign. Okay, that's the only way I can actually start any function. Simple arithmetic functions are going to be able to be done with the keys that we already know, okay? Like the plus sign or the minus sign, the multiplication, and the, sorry, and the division sign. And I'm not going to get that one, right? So those are going to be the basic signs, and we're going to be able to work with them in Excel. Any other function, because Excel has hundreds of functions, we can always start by putting an equal sign and start writing what you want. So for example, I want to do the sum function. I can start writing the sum, and then I will find all the functions that Excel has that begin with soup or sum, okay, in this case. Once I've chosen, always inside the function, Excel is very smart and it will tell us what it's looking for. So sum function is always looking for a number and a number, okay? And it goes with a point. That means it goes infinity. You can sum up 256 different numbers. Might not be the best one to put it one by one, but you could put it one by one, or you could also put it as a range, okay? That means I can always go one, comma, and another one, okay? Or I will always be able to get a range, and you select your range with your mouse. And I will get the same answer. Range is probably going to be the fastest way to do it, rather than do it one by one. Okay? There would be other functions that will tell us different things. For example, when we start working with distributions, okay, like for the normal distribution, and it will tell us exactly what we need. So here is going to be our random variable. And then our mean, once I'll start writing numbers, and then our mean, okay? And I'll write down the number just so that we have it. And our mean, and then it's asking for the standard deviation. So let me go put 0. Okay, and then it says, then you'll get functions like these that says true and false. And you can always write true and the word true, or in Excel, true is always 0 and false, true is always 1, true is always 1, and false is always going to be 0. So that's another way. Excel will always help you. But if you're not comfortable with doing functions that way, you can always go to the function menu and ask for help there. Okay, so if I go here and here's the function menu or the formulas menu, I can always look, you can always insert the function and write a brief description like normal, and it will tell you all the ones that have something of normal in it. So here's the normal distribution one, or here is the other one. So you can always look at the function, you can always write it like that, or if you know what area it is, if it's a financial function, if it's a logical function, okay? If it's a text function, time and date, there are more functions. Here are statistical functions. So here are all the statistical functions that Excel has. They will always be right there, okay? So this is basically, it's very basic. Always in Excel, it's always going to be referenced. A cell will always be referenced by the column letter and by the row number. And that will always be a relative reference, okay? So if you always see, like for example here, B2 is going to be a relative function. That means that if I pull down a formula, I will always be able to move that relative function. I'm going to go here. I'll put more variables. I'll put more functions here. I'm going to put random numbers. Okay. And if I want to just keep adding numbers, let's say I'm going to be adding my numbers of my first variables. I'm going to add plus, and this one plus. This is 90. So if you see, it says B1 plus B2. In this B1 plus B2, these are normal references, okay? That means that they're relative relevant. Then if I pull them down, that's what I'm going to do, my references is going to change. So if I was at 1 adding A plus B, then the next one's going to be, it pulls down 1. Since I moved my cell 1, it's going to go down 1. That means no longer A plus B, but B plus C, and so on and so forth. But what happens when I actually need this one to be fixed? Okay, what if I'm multiplying and this is a range? Let's say this is 0.05, 5%. Okay, what if I actually want that to be fixed? Well, one way to do it is going to be A times me physically writing 0.05. Okay, that's 1.7. Is it easy to do that? Yes, of course. Then I can go ahead and pull it. I'm going to pull all the way to there. This is the 5% of A through G. But what happens when I want to change this number and it's no longer 0.5%, but 0.10? Okay, it didn't change because this was done manually. And in Excel, we don't really want that to be done. We like it to have some sort of reference so that everything changes and so that we don't make mistakes, especially when we're doing data analysis. We want it to be all connected, and making movements one by one is usually going to cause errors. We're human. So what we do is, instead of doing that, we would reference it to a cell. Okay, so 10% of 34 is 3.4. But here's what happens. And because they're relative references, if I pull it down, it appears at 0. Why does it appear at 0? Because like I am referencing and I pulled it down and it's my relative references, this one is actually referencing B2, but it's also pulled down that formula of B2. So what do we want? Well, it's something that's called an absolute reference. And that absolute reference means you're going to stay fixed to that. How do we get a relative reference? Well, a relative reference, relative reference is going to be basically, we start off the same. We reference the cell that we want, but we now are going to fix it. How do we fix it? Well, if you have a Windows computer, you're going to be doing it with either the function key plus the F4 or just the F4. Depends on the configuration of your keyboard. If you have a Mac, you're going to be doing it with the command key and with the T for T, or the T for task, okay? Those two are going to be, you're going to push them together, you're going to click on them together, and if you see, now we have this. It's put this $ before the D and before the 1. What is that $ telling us? Well, it's not actually a $, even though it is, but it's not implying that it's money. What it's implying is that it is fixed for the column and it is fixed for the row. If I just wanted enough, for example, if I push it again, if I push, in my case, it is the F4 key. If I push it again, it is only fixing the row. And if I push it again, it's only fixing the column. If I push it again, the dollar sign disappears and nothing is fixed. But since I wanted to stay in that particular cell, it's going to have both, okay? So that means depending on where I'm going to pull my formula, if I'm pulling it downward, if I'm pulling it sideways, I can fix it different ways. Meaning I can only want for you, even if I'm pulling it to the right, I'm sorry, to the left, no, to the right, yes, to the right, sorry. If I'm pulling it to the right, that means I can fix the column or I can fix the row, okay? And it's going to depend on what you need. In this case, it's one cell, and I always wanted to stay on that one cell. So basically, you don't see anything different in your first try, but when I pull it down, now I do get the 10% only for those cells. Okay, so this is very important. So you can always remember what is your relative reference and what is your absolute reference. It is going to help you a lot with a lot of functions in Excel. Okay, so you're going to have also several menus in Excel. And the first one is your home or your inicio if you have it in Spanish. And always what you're going to have is obviously the copy and the paste. The paste has some very important tools here. And the first one is, and there's more of the paste, but I'm going to give you basically the ones that I consider or that I've used more often. One is to convert, if you have a formula, to convert it into just a value. Why do I want this? Because if I'm going to maybe copy it down to another sheet or maybe to another book, this cell, like I said right now, this cell has a reference. It's referencing the cell B1 and it's referencing the cell B1. If I change it around, I could have the problem that I lose my reference and I'll get an error that is called reference. It's called ref, but it's an error of reference. It's lost that reference and it doesn't know what to do. So the value can be very, very good to be able to use when you're going to be able to do that. And also, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these. Another one that I found that has been very, very useful is one, and I'm going to go here to paste. And one has to do with this particular function, which is also, well, one, the column width, it requests a column width, especially if you're pasting it to a new file, but one that is called transpose. The transpose is going to be a really good one because it's going to paste. If I had them in columns, it's going to paste it in rows. And if I had them in rows, it's going to paste it in columns, which just helps so much. So I copied it and I don't want this necessarily in columns. So I'm going to transpose this right here. As you can see, it's lost the reference there. I have this error because it's losing the reference. So one of the things that I can first do is I can open the special menu. I can tell it you're going to paste it in values and you're going to transpose it. And now it's transposed it, it changed it from rows to columns, but it has respected the value. If I click on it, you're going to see there is no more formula. And you just have to be very careful there because then if I was to change this particular value again to 0.5, it only changed my original and not what I pasted. Just have to be very careful about that. But that's one of the tools. Obviously, you have the formatting tools, okay? You can change the coloring, the lettering, things like that. You can also change the orientation or the position, the alignment of where it's at, if you want it in the middle, if you want it to the left-hand side, to the right-hand side, if you want it to have an indent or not. The next tools here are basically for format, and I would be very, very cautious, especially when you're using the merging one, because it's very complicated to do data analysis with cells that have been merged. So just be cautious about using it. Merging will merge cells, literally does what it says. So instead of having 3 cells, now you only have 1, okay? I would be very, very cautious of that. I've seen a lot of people use it, especially when they feel that it is not wide enough. And so they need a wider column, but that will make it so that it's very, very complicated and very, very messy to do data analysis. So just be wary of that. Okay, then you have the types of data, and the types of data, what type my data is going to be, is also very important because it will allow you to use certain formulas or not. Okay, so usually the one that is going to be fixed is going to be the one that's general. Takes it as a number. Okay, takes it as a letter. It doesn't have a specific one, but I can change it to a number if I want. I can change it to accounting. Okay, I can change it to a time date. So just be wary that once you change it here, it's going to change the type of data, and it's also going to change the type of formulas that I can do with that. Okay, for example, if I have and I've decided that this is going to be a text, I can no longer add it. So I can no longer add this formula. Right now it did do it. But if I have more data that is all in text format, it can cause certain types of problems. For example, I was able to add it, but how about if I actually do a formula on it? Sum is one of those specific formulas that, not able to grab it, but that is not even letting me do the formula because one, I did not put it correctly. Okay. But since it is a text, it kind of reads it and says, no, we can't do that. Okay, so just be wary of that when you're doing it, when you're working, especially there are functions such as the X lookup formula that you're not going to be able to work on it. It's going to tell you, I can't do it. It's going to stay like this. When you're doing simple formulas, it will do it, with simple operators. But when you're doing a more complex formula or using a formula in Excel, when it is not the correct type, you might not be able to do it. So just be wary of it, okay? Then you have this, and we can talk about it more, the conditional formatting. It will put a different format depending on the condition that you want. It's very helpful when you're doing data analysis because obviously we're visual creatures. We like to look at different things, and it's going to help us. So this is one of those tools that I will make another video on it, how we can use it, either with a formula or just with the formats that are already there with Excel. But this is a really good tool that you can also use. Okay. Obviously, the next tools, and I'm going to use a database that we're working on in class, which is the supermarket and the markets, to be able to work with some other things. But here, obviously, you have something called the sort and filter. And these are the bases or the very, very basics of being able to do data analysis. Why is that? Well, because if I look at this database or this data set, we have, if I'm not mistaken, it was 281. It's very complicated initially. Just to look at the data set and say, yes, this one's better, this one's worse. I interpret this, I can do this, the average is this, the standard deviation. It's very, very complicated. So the very basis of it is to be able to sort and to filter. So if you remember, this is the type of store that you went to, the two _1. Okay, so we're going to, this is the markets, okay, the municipal markets. If you went to here, then it's easier. You can always count and say, oh, 140 people go to municipal markets. Okay, and you can filter out things, you can sort, you can order them, things like that. That's one simple way to do it. Then you have the insert, and we talked about it in another one of the videos of the pivot tables, and the pivot tables are going to help us order a lot of things, are going to help us summarize a lot of things. And I can do several different things with this particular option. And I'm going to go ahead and do one again. If I select all my data, and you can select it using your mouse, or you can also, probably not the best, best practice. I would tell you it's not the best practice, but you can always select it using this triangle. And if I go to pivot table, I always like to choose that it goes to a new sheet because it just seems the most easiest way to do it. And if you remember, you have all of your fields here on the right-hand side. You just need your dictionary. You need to have that sheet where you are able to see what each thing means. And you have your 4 boxes, and it's basically a drag and drop method. But one of the things that we didn't see in the other video was how to get simple things like seeing what is the average of those that go to municipal markets. So let's do that. So one of the things is municipal markets. It was this, the P question 2_1, and I'm going to go ahead and put rows. 1 is the one who we'll do it 2 different ways. Okay, we'll do it this one. This is more visually, and we'll do the one that is just concentrated in one single data, which when we're doing data analysis, we don't want data that we're not going to use there because it causes a lot of noise, especially if you later on are going to be doing some sort of dashboard. You don't want more information that you really don't need, or that's going to cause noise, or that's going to cause distractions when you're actually reading your dashboard, okay? But we'll do it this way so that you can see it. Here we see 0 are those who do not go to municipal markets, and 1 are those who do go to municipal markets. And if you remember, if you go down to your questions of how much people spend, if I'm not mistaken, how much people spend, and I have it in another sheet, how much people spend in the markets is going to be, give me just a second. It's going to be the question 9. So question 9 will go here, find P9. You can always find it from here, from the search bar. P9, there it is. And I can always put it in value. So remember what we talked about in the other session, P9 is going to be, since it's a number, it will always sum it to begin with. If it is if it's going to be an alphanumerical value, it will always count it. But right now, since it's this, it will always sum it. If the question was, what is the average that they spend? Well, there's 2 ways to do it. One, you can always go to your pivot table, right click on it, and where it says summarize value as, you can always say, give me an average. Okay, that's one way. Or another way, I'm going to go back, is going to your little box of values. You have the option, this little like inverted triangle, this little arrow, depends on your version, will give you always different values. And if you go here to the very last one, in Spanish it's configuración de campo de valor. This one says value field settings because in English. If I click on it, then I have one. You can always rename it. You don't have to do this. You don't have to keep the same value, especially if you're going to show it. But you can always, there is the average. So once I have the average, it gives me the exact same value. So this is one way to do it. Like I said, when we're doing more data analysis, you don't want more data than you have, so it doesn't cause noise. You can always put this row, this 2_1, where we're actually seeing who goes to the market and who doesn't. I can always put it in filter, and in filter, I can always select the ones who do go, and I have the same value right here, but now it is very focused only on those who go to municipal markets. Now, this is not obviously, this is not a amount in pesos or in dollars. So you can always go here to the number style, and you can always say this is going to be a money one. I'm going to take it away just for a second, just to illustrate, we have a lot of decimals here. You can always go to the options and to the very bottom where it says more number options and say, you know what, it's a number and I only want 2 decimals or I want 3 decimals, you decide. Or you have these 2 options right here underneath the type of data. okay? And it says increase decimals or decrease. If I decrease my decimals just by clicking, I will always keep the number of decimals that I want. Obviously, if you put that it is money or currency, it will always leave 2. So this is another way you can do it, okay? If I wanted here not only to do the average, but also to do the standard deviation of it, Excel or pivot chart always have it. So I can always get my data, even though it's already checkmarked. See, it's already checkmarked. You can always put it twice. I'm going to go ahead and put it again. And there it is. The first one says it is an average. The other one is a sum. We don't want either. We want the standard deviation. How do we do it? We can always go to the options of value field setting or right click to summarize value as. And here it will say more options. It will open the same menu as there. And at the very bottom, it has standard deviation. The standard deviation or the standard deviation by population, we'll use standard deviation. And now I have a standard deviation. Okay, so there are different things that you can do. I hope this helps you with your work. Keep in mind that I gave you the analogy in class. Excel is like Sheldon. It is very, very smart. Sheldon of the Big Bang Theory. It is very, very, very smart. It just sometimes clashes socially with people. And when that happens, you have to be very, very critical of your answer. If something doesn't quite fit, and this is the part of being analytical. This is the competency of being analytical. You have to question yourself. Does it sound right? Does it sound right that I have 566 pesos on average of what people are spending in municipal markets? Well, I have to look at my data a little bit and I have to question myself. Does it sound right if I'm, for example, if I am here and instead of having the summary, if I'm counting, do I have 137? And you can question yourself and say, no, but I have 201, 281 data. Why do I have 137 there? Well, because I'm filtering it. So you have to question yourself. It's not just always, Excel is not always going to give you the exact answer, and not because it's not smart. It is smart. Sometimes it has to do with us. Sometimes it has to do with the data that we gave it, how clean our data is. But also sometimes there are little tiny things in our formula that give it something different. And it is our job to be very analytical, to go back and check, or just to make sure, does it make sense to you? Imagine this count didn't give me 137, but gave me, if I was instead of counting because by mistake, I clicked on, let's say, max. Does it make sense that if I'm trying to count, I have 6,000? No, it doesn't make sense because I know that the maximum people that I surveyed was 281. So also, even if I'm counting, I'm gonna go ahead and put again, count, does it make sense that it's $137 or pesos? No, it doesn't make sense. Why does it make sense? Because I'm counting and I'm not counting money in this particular case. I'm counting how many answered. So I would have to go back and change and say, okay, 137 people surveyed go to the supermarket and gave me an answer to how much they're spending, okay? You have to be very critical, not only of the number that Excel is giving, but also how you are presenting it and how you are interpreting, okay? We will do more videos on this so that it becomes more and more natural for you to be working with Excel. Thank you, and I will see you on our next session.